Right. So, as we said, what we're doing is the biggest achievement one can undertake with a human body to run around with. To sit down and meditate and complete the feedback loop with our source is a major thing in life. The major thing in life. The so-called mystics of thousands of years have been saying to us, wake up, wake up. And waking up is what we're intending to do here. I mean, in our lives, not just sitting here now with this meeting. Waking up is the whole point of it. And we wake up by removing or allowing the imbalances in our body, which are getting in the way of our experience of life in its wholeness. It's only stress, physiological stress, that's the cause of our ignorance. We come into life, we come into birth, and in that process, the fight or flight response is activated just in birth, which is a good thing because that's what allows birth to take place. But because we've forgotten how to be a fully awake human being, that is experiencing 4 states of consciousness, we gradually get deeper and deeper into ignorance through stress created in the body. It hides, like the clouds hiding the sun. The sun's always there, but the clouds are hiding the experience of the full reality of life, that there's a sun up there creating or allowing this planet to exist is because of the sun. And we exist as human beings because of consciousness, pure consciousness, which is what we are, deciding to manifest on this planet. And so the process of yoga, this coming back into a state of unity, is uniting our relative self with our absolute self. And that comes about through doing almost nothing, of course. The big thing to emphasize about TM is that it's a technique of doing nothing, almost. If we do nothing at all, nothing will happen. We do something so tiny that it just is enough to set off the process of stress release, which is so natural to us. And setting it off in that context of being sitting quietly, we're able to release enormous amounts of stress, which would normally be uncomfortable if we were moving about in activity. But by doing it sitting down, we release a huge amount of stress, bring ourselves back to normality. And the process is one of just thinking a mantra innocently, as you all know. You're all aware of this diagram here, which at the moment has nothing on it. So as if by magic, I'll put up a fully completed chart just to remind ourselves. We sit down to meditate, we think the mantra innocently, and innocence is the key, of course. Always remember, innocence is the key. We think the mantra innocently. As a result of that, the mind, having the mantra to rest its attention on, the mantra is a vibration of a particular type that has a synchrony with pure consciousness, and or of the nearest thing to pure, the first sprouting out of pure consciousness, which is the primordial hum. This is where the mantras come from. The mantra has a tendency to shift the attention away from external towards internal progress. The mind settles down under the influence of the mantra. The body automatically goes with it because the body can't avoid that. Mind and body work together always. Every mental event has a corresponding physical event and vice versa. So the mind settles down, the body settles down. We get deep rest as we're approaching pure consciousness, unbounded awareness. In that deep rest, stress can't stay in the presence of deep silence in the body. Stress starts to be released. Stress is a physiological imbalance, but its subtlest level, an imbalance of energy, as everything is on the manifested level. That energy starts being released, and that energy creates physical activity. It's an increase of physical activity in the body. When the physical activity increases in the body, automatically the mind will follow it, just as it did on the other side. Mental activity will increase, become out on a thought, and then we realize that we're thinking the thought. This is the green bit at the top. This is the whole technique of TM. The question mark, I realize, oops, I'm not thinking the mantra, and I just return with the arrow there, I return to it again. So the question mark is in that area of thought there, random thought, no matter what thought, we suddenly have that realization, I'm not thinking the mantra, we return to it and start this process again. And that's it. And it astonishes people, many of you, when you first learnt TM are astonished at how simple it is. Is that it? No, that's my reaction. That can't be it. Surely no. Now, all these things I've read about that TM does, that can't be it. There's got to be a lot more to it than that. But in terms of the technique, that is it. And innocence is the key again. I can't say that often enough, because it's by innocence that we make progress. Any attempt to manipulate the process will have the opposite effect. It'll take you backwards. Why is innocence the key? Because it's the nature of the mind to seek freedom, to seek happiness, to seek bliss. Pure consciousness, the mind, when it's in its deep settled, totally settled state, is Satchitananda, eternal bliss consciousness, the kingdom of heaven, as it was called in religion. Pure consciousness, unbounded silence, the self. That's bliss. And every activity in our lives is geared towards finding happiness, which is a sort of a pale version of bliss. And the problem is, the one problem in all our lives is ignorance. We're looking in the wrong place. We're looking for happiness in things we do, things we achieve, sensory experiences we have. And yes, that can temporarily, having some nice experience, whether it's eating a nice bit of food, whether it's meeting a loved one, all these different experiences of all the five senses will give us some relief from the agony of ignorance. And we mistake that for happiness. It's pleasure. It's pleasure, and what we really want is happiness. We're looking for it, and we can't find it. And as we meditate, we're coming back to what we really want, which is to discover where happiness is. And happiness, pure happiness, is the fourth state of consciousness. Turiya Chetana, which means the fourth state, underlies waking, sleeping, and dreaming. And when we reconnect those three active states, waking, sleeping, and dreaming, even sleeping is active compared with pure consciousness. And when we can reconnect those four states together, we have normal functioning in a body. And that's when we return to this is what creates the state of enlightenment, fully waking up to who we really are. That we never lose ultimately, as transcendence becomes cosmic consciousness by the momentary glimpses of deep silence, expanding and expanding and expanding until finally they are our total experience, backing up every waking, sleeping, dreaming experience. Then that is enlightenment, and that is knowing the total nature of reality. And that's when we stop suffering. All suffering is produced by this process not going on spontaneously in our physiology. And just with that little key, a good friend of mine who's now passed on, Father Adrian Smith, a Catholic priest, wrote a book called A Key to the Kingdom of Heaven, talking about TM as a key to the kingdom of heaven. As a Christian, he saw that this was what religion was talking about when it talked about God and humanity as being separate. It had forgotten the key. It had forgotten the process of rejoining so-called God and so-called humanity back into oneness again, into unity. So again, innocence is the key. We think the mantra innocently. When we realize that we're all over the place during our meditation, we just come back again, mentally that is, we then just come back very innocently and effortlessly to the mantra. And the release of stress can cause us in meditation to feel that we're having far too many thoughts. Always remember, you can't have too many thoughts. You'll only have as many thoughts as is relevant, appropriate at that particular point in time during your meditation. And a lot of thoughts in meditation is a sign that you're releasing a lot of stress, and that's fantastic. We don't judge the value of the meditation by our experience during the meditation. It's not relevant at all, because there are two aspects. It's Maurice always used to refer to two sides of the same coin. We don't complain that the coin has heads on it when we only want tails, or vice versa. We know that a coin has two sides to it, and it's the same with our meditation. It has two aspects: the inward stroke, designated by the blue arrow, the outward stroke, designated by the red arrow. They are not mutually exclusive. They're two aspects of one process. So we come out of a deep meditation and say, yes, that was good. I hope I have another one like that tomorrow. And we come out of a shallow meditation saying, I hope we do better tomorrow. And there's a complete misunderstanding. Coming out of a deep meditation and experiencing a feeling blissful is no better. It's more enjoyable, absolutely. And from that respect, you could call it better, but it's not any better than coming out of a meditation full of thoughts and thinking, that was a waste of time, which is often our first thought, even after we've been meditating some while. And it's not, because that waste of time, that release of stress that's caused the meditation to be all over the place, is a sign that we're releasing the stress, which is moving us forward. That is progress. We talk about enlightenment. We move towards enlightenment. The sum total of all our meditations is enlightenment, being fully awake. And that comes about through the alternation of deep meditation and shallow meditation. So we don't judge the value of the meditation by the level of enjoyment. Completely misleading. We come out of a meditation that's full of thoughts and say, wonderful, wonderful. Absolute chaos. Where was the bliss? None of it there at all. Wonderful. Because that's what I needed at that moment. And if we don't understand that, then that's when we get into mistakes of forgetting to meditate and just finding we're drifting away from it. And, remember that the fourth state of consciousness is the foundation of the surface three levels. So not understanding this and not practicing TM, we're liable to drift away again from the stability of waking, sleeping and dreaming. Waking, sleeping and dreaming, in most people in society nowadays, has no stability to it. We're all over the place. And this is why we have 60,000 thoughts a day, and something like 97% of them are the same as yesterday. Complete chaos. The more we meditate, the more the number of thoughts we have will reduce. We're using more and more of the mind. And so instead of using 3% of our mental potential, we start to use 4%, 5%, 6%, 10%, 20%. Not 20% of the brain, as was put out in newspapers 2 or 3 years ago. All this idea of having all these thoughts and trying to get rid of them is a mistake. And in TM, we're not trying to get rid of thoughts. We're allowing the mind to expand. The idea that we're using only 10% of the mind, we talk about in TM, not 10% of the brain. We're using all the brain, but to less than 10% of its potential. And that's what TM achieves for us, or the nature of life. TM doesn't achieve it. TM's the key. It's just surrendering to the laws of nature. And sometimes if you say that, people say, oh dear, I don't want to surrender to anything. What we're doing is surrendering to ourselves, because we are the laws of nature. In reality, we are pure consciousness, and the laws of nature emanate from pure consciousness. So we can never be surrendering to anybody in TM. We are surrendering to ourselves. Maharishi talked about it in terms of the baby surrendering to its mother in the arms of the mother. The baby is innocent. The newborn baby in the arms of a mother is innocent, and that is our relationship with Mother Nature when we meditate with TM. We're like the baby in the arms of the mother. Mother has no option but to give us exactly what we need at any given time. And people talk about the love of God. This is the love of God, the love of the self for the self. Because the self, ourself, and God are the same thing. In spiritual traditions, not religious traditions so much, but in spiritual traditions, they talk about searching for God and then finding yourself, or searching for yourself and finding God. They are the same thing. Has anybody got any questions about these basics of TM?
Some of you may have overheard me talking in the break earlier about feeling unable to meditate because of all those thoughts. And as Colin has said there, of course, thoughts are part of the process. And remember, the longer we've been meditating, the more keen the body is to throw off the stress, or the more rapidly the body, or more easily the body will throw off stress. The nervous system becomes more flexible. You'll have heard us talking before about this analogy of the rock sand and water in terms of our nervous system and its flexibility as we continue to meditate, how it lets go of stress more easily as time goes by. I heard another analogy recently, similar, explaining the same thing really, of like, just in terms of kind of substance or the kind of quality, when we talk about the nervous system of a non-meditator being like rock, because it's like rock or like metal or something hard, something of hard quality. You make an impression, and that impression is deeply ingrained, and isn't going to spring back to shape, if you like. It's made a deep, lasting impression. Nervous system of a new meditator is like sand. Make an impression in sand, and soon that will blow over. Or you could like plasticine. It's more malleable. You make an impression, and it can be molded back again more easily. It's more flexible. Nerve system of a long-term meditator is like water, or like this person was describing, like a sponge ball. You squeeze it, and as soon as you let go, it springs. Even in the process of letting go, it's already springing back into its proper shape. And the stress is like a distortion in the physiology. And as say, the longer we've been meditating, the more keen the body is to, or more easily the body will let it go again. Of course, meditating doesn't stop the challenges that we experience in the relative field. Out in activity, life can be just as, present itself with all those challenges, and the body reacts. That there'll be a need for the body to react sometimes, but the less and less the body is holding on to that stress. So when we experience turbulence and lots of challenges out in activity, if we go through a particularly turbulent time, the body may be even keener to let go of it when you sit down to meditate. But it's at those times that we think, oh, life is so challenging at the moment and so much going on and so chaotic. I just want to sit down and stop my thoughts, because I don't want to be thinking about this anymore. I just want to get away from it. But of course, the opposite experience may happen. As the body is keen to let go of that stress, we might experience even more thoughts than usual. And those thoughts, remember, the thoughts that we have will tend to be whatever's on our mind. And if that particular experience that's going on is on your mind, which it will be, that may be what you seem to be thinking a lot about in your meditation. Thoughts all about those challenging experiences. And you may think, oh, I didn't want this in meditation. This isn't meditating. Surely I came for a nice peaceful experience of transcending. Well, no, as Colin said, you get what you need, not necessarily what you want. You get what you need. So very good experience. We just come back to the mantra easily. If you find with a strong release of stress, we might find that the mind is caught up in thought for a considerable time. And we might have the misunderstanding at the end of the meditation, oh, surely that wasn't meditating, because I was just sitting there thinking about this thing that's going on in my life all through that meditation. How was that meditating? It was meditating because you had the intention to come back to the mantra. Whatever happened next was part of the process. If a strong release of stress caught the mind and got you held up in that thoughts about that thing, fine. When you realise you're not thinking it, come back to it. If 10 minutes has gone by, that's fine. You intended to come back to it. So we come back to it as soon as we realise we're not thinking it. Also, one experience may be of a moderately strong release of stress, mantra and thoughts going along together. Remember, as Colin was saying, we don't try and push thoughts out. We don't resist them. We don't fight them. We just innocently favour the mantra. Actually, somebody's asking this question. I find it hard to fully appreciate the term innocently. I either return to the mantra or I don't. Can you explain a bit more? We always say innocence is the key. Colin, have you got any other words to explain innocence?
No expectation, no intention. In the siddhis, we use after practicing our TM, we come into the sutras in which we have an intention. But that intention in the siddhis is very, very slight. It's the faintest intention. And the power of it is based on our meditation before we start the siddhis being innocent attention. And so innocent attention creates the ability to have intentions during the siddhis at the very, very finest level. And the power of the siddhi sutra is inversely proportional to the manifestation of the sutra. The more fine and subtle the sutra is, the more powerful it is. And it's like that with thinking the mantra. We're thinking very, very faintly, and we have no intention. It's just the attention. This attention is known as dharana. And it's often or more normally translated, unfortunately, over the last few hundred years, as concentration. Now, that is effort, that is intention. And it's not very powerful. You have to do a lot of uncomfortable work to get anywhere at all. With TM, we do the least and accomplish the most, simply by allowing nature to do it all for us. So innocence is allowing nature to do it all for you. Simply thinking the mantra, and that's it. You think it so innocently, so faintly, without any intention to try and make something happen. Sometimes when people are finding that they're not transcending very deeply, they try and put more effort into it, which is exactly the opposite of what they should be doing. If I try a bit harder, something will happen. No, it won't. It's the nature of the mind to transcend. And all we can do is to get in the way. So with the mantra, we're just allowing the mind to go with the natural tendency of the mind to move towards unboundedness. This is where the happiness is, the bliss is. So the mind is automatically moving there. So any trying on our part to encourage the mind to move in a direction we want it to is actually going to be getting in the way of the process.
Colin, I don't know whether it's useful for me to give kind of like how I experience it. The difference between innocence and effort. If I'm being innocent, I feel like the whole meditation, I'm just floating along, and sometimes I'll have thoughts and then sometimes I'll have the mantra. But sometimes during a meditation, I will consciously think, oh, I need to think the mantra. And it's as if my mind is changing gears. It's becoming far more, I don't know, controlled by me, but there's a conscious shift in how I feel, and that's the point that I know that I'm making effort, and I know I have to bring innocence back into the meditation.
Yeah, and the thing to remember, that's a good point, Chris. And we're thinking thoughts all the time, 60,000 thoughts a day. How much effort do you put into thinking those 60,000 thoughts? If you think about it as 60,000 thoughts a day, you think, blimey, that must be a lot of effort. But I've been doing that all day, and I don't feel I've made any effort to think. And so the point here is that the thinking of the mantra is just the same thinking as all the other thinking you do. And this is what we try to emphasize in the checking of meditation. The thinking of a mantra is exactly the same as thinking any other thought you thought previously. All the other 60,000 thoughts you've thought all day, when we think the mantra, we do it in just the same way. We don't treat the mantra especially at all. It's just a faint idea like any other thought. And somebody's mentioned here about feelings arising during the stress release. And they do, particularly fear, anger. Anger's a big one that comes up a lot with people, with certain people. And they indicate a strong release of stress. Those won't normally come up. We just get normal thoughts. If the release of stress is strong, then we can get some of these feelings coming up. And they are just a sign of stronger release of stress than normal. Not your average. Your average release of stress will just tend to bring up ordinary everyday thoughts. Oh, I've forgotten to put the cat out, or what's I going to do when I get out from meditation? Just ordinary everyday thoughts. Feelings are a sign it's a stronger stress release, and it's good. Remember, the experience of anger or fear or anxiety during your meditation is just because you're bringing up qualities of stress. When the stress release is stronger than average, it will tend to bring up an experience of the stress. But it's the experience of the stress leaving. When a lot of people say, "Oh, how do I know this is not making me more anxious than I was before I learned to meditate?" You're not getting more stressed. It's the stress leaving. The mind is experiencing it almost as exactly the same as the original stress when it's very strong. If it's a very strong one, it can get that strong that it feels as if you're actually getting more stressed. But what's actually happening is that the mind is experiencing the stress release and saying, oh dear, I feel anxious. And the body at the same time is saying, oh, I'm experiencing stress release. That's wonderful. Let's have more of it because I'm feeling better and better. The body is feeling more and more free and comfortable, as the mind might be getting temporarily a bit more agitated. But it's just the mind experiencing that. It's not affecting the mind. It's not stress being created. It's stress leaving, which to the mind seems like the same thing. But to the body, it's very, very different. And remember, there's no stress in your mind. The stress you're feeling in your mind is simply what you're feeling, what's in the body, what's going on in the body.
Just going back to the innocence as well, I'm not sure if we made clear the point also that innocence includes not trying to hold on to the mantra. We have our preference to think the mantra, we intend to think it, but we're not rigidly attached to that preference. We don't have the intention to hold on to it. We understand that it's part of the process for it to fade away, but we're not trying to hold on to it. It's not a clear pronunciation, just a faint idea, just to add that into the innocence aspect.
The question is, the yoga sequence, preparing for TM, is it a separate course? Yes, in as much as it's not taught by us as TM teachers. It's taught by a qualified, we've got a number of fully qualified yoga teachers, many fully qualified yoga teachers we've taught to meditate. The main time to learn yoga postures that is preferable is when you come on a retreat. There's always space for everybody new to get on a retreat. And that live is obviously the best way to do it. But it's a good substitute in these difficult times that we do it online for the time being.
The key to these yoga postures are innocence, stretching with awareness, with attention, and with full attention on the body. There should be no reason for anyone to create any strain or injury if we have our full attention on the body. However, of course, some individuals may have different health complaints and may need to take some particular cautions with some particular postures. So that's why it's important to have a qualified yoga teacher to just give that extra guidance to individuals.
And that full attention on the body has come up, is implied in a question that somebody's asking here. Can you talk about stress release out of meditation? I can feel an unfamiliar discomfort when out for a walk sometimes now. That's a very good question because, again, just as Gemma has said, full attention on the body, as we do in yoga postures, when we feel we're releasing stress and something uncomfortable is happening. And this is whether it's anything connected with stress release from TM or anything else. The attention you give your body outside of meditation, during and after yoga postures as well. The attention that you give your body, full attention on your body, is the most powerful healing thing in the world is human attention. And over time, you will find that just allowing your attention to go to some place of discomfort when it arises, whether it's in meditation, suddenly getting significant discomfort, or more regularly it tends to happen outside meditation, you'd simply put your attention on the pain, and it's more powerful. If it's a headache, putting your attention on it ultimately is more powerful than a paracetamol, and eventually you can banish headaches completely by giving the mind and body what they want. And the body particularly wants attention from the mind. When the body gets attention from the mind fully, it's a gradual process, but it's the most powerful healing process that can be that you can ever create in your body, more powerful than pharmaceuticals. But we always say to people, if the doctors prescribe something, don't just give it up when you learn TM or when you've been meditating a while. The body will tend to not need it so much, and you'll get that feeling. Always discuss it with your doctor. If you've got some very powerful drugs that you've been taking for many years, always discuss it with the doctor first. But yes, you can rely on the body eventually to restore its own healing, infinite healing power.
So, of course, as meditators, if we have a particularly strong release of stress through our meditation, as Colin was saying, it can continue into activity. So we could experience potentially some discomfort out in activity as a result of the stress release continuing after meditating. And of course, we manage that by, if necessary, speak to your teacher, and if necessary, we might reduce the meditation a bit. And that's a circumstance that can come up for some people. However, also remember that as meditators, we're becoming more aware of the body, more in tune with the body. To use this word embodiment, that's a big popular term around, another buzzword that's come up lately, embodiment. We're more embodied. In other words, we're more aware of the body. The body doesn't have to shout so loudly to be heard by us. And so we may be more aware of some subtler sensations from the body coming up. And it's the body calling out for attention. It wants some attention there, and we bring our as called in Sanskrit, our soma, our consciousness, our awareness, our attention to that. And as Colin said, that's very powerful. So yeah, good thing to do.
I've got a question about thoughts and the innocence of thoughts and about the mantra as a thought, because I started to notice when we do the meditation checks sometimes, I became very familiar with the idea that thoughts just come up spontaneously. And then I realized that thoughts and the mantra are quite different, because the mantra doesn't have a meaning, whereas our thoughts usually are concepts or feelings or something with meaning. But the mantra is effectively just a sound.
Absolutely.
And it feels different to think the mantra than to think those other thoughts. And I just wanted to ask if I've missed a point or anything.
It may feel a little bit different, but in terms of what we do about it, it's no different. We just think it just the same way as we think any other thought. The difference between a thought with intention and a thought with no intention is minuscule in reality. But we can have times when there seems to be a big difference, but just let it go. It's just an idea. Famous people sometimes get the idea they can't meditate, and that's just an idea. It's not true. Anybody who can think can meditate. So it's just these ideas. I mean, you haven't had that thought for very long, have you? Probably just comes up now and again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just we can have all these thoughts that come up, and sort of tendency to analyse and overanalyze the thinking process. We've been thinking for decades without having any effort involved, and Maharishi insisted, and I'm sure it's your experience most of the time, and has been. Otherwise, you wouldn't be successfully meditating now. We tend to make when we have these other perspectives that suddenly come in, and it's often through release of stress itself that we get these funny perspectives coming in that, oh, this is different, or I can't do this, or something. And we just say, oh, that's interesting, and just pass on. Just ignore it, and it'll just go away. We're not trying to analyse. People get convinced that it's like with mantras. People suddenly say, oh, my mantra sounds like my ex-boyfriend's name, and I suddenly realised, and now I can't get it out of my mind that it's to do with my ex-boyfriend. And I said, well, it's only a problem if you think it is. And countless people have come to me with over the years, over the 30-odd years I've been teaching, saying, oh, because of this I can't meditate. And when I said, well, it's not a problem, just know it's not a problem, and it'll go. And it always does. It's never a problem, really. We just get loads and loads of people get those feelings suddenly. Oh, yes, this is a problem. And it's not.
On another point about thoughts, Layla's asked, would it help to keep a journal of our thoughts during meditation? No. Another point to remember about thoughts is that the meaning of thoughts is not important. So we're not stopping to analyse them. It's just release of stress. The content isn't relevant. Okay, so one analogy that's been used is it's like putting the rubbish out. You remember what Colin's just been saying about release of stress. It's the release of stress which is triggering thoughts to come up. It's triggering mental activity. As the mind is kicked into activity, it has to have something to be active about. What can I be active about? I grab something to be active about. It doesn't matter what it is. It's not, it's completely irrelevant to the process. It's just grabbing something to be active about. And so it's a bit like putting out the rubbish. The content of thoughts is just the rubbish coming up. It may reflect the quality of the stress that's coming up, but it's not relevant. So yeah, we can liken it to putting out the rubbish. If you take your rubbish out outside, you don't stop and open it up and have a rummage around and see what it is that you're putting out. You just put it out. We're not interested in the content. It's rubbish. We know it's got to go, and just put it out there. It's not useful to stop and analyse it in this process. Of course, we may get some of the thoughts that come up might be some inspiration, intuition, creativity at some points, and at those points it might feel tempting to, I just want to write that down. That's really useful. If it's a useful thought, if it really is some powerful insight, and it's going to be useful, it will be there after the meditation. Okay, so just trust that process, and okay, I'll come back to that after meditation and just return to the mantra.